Here we go.
Hello.
Hello.
I feel at this point, I almost really feel like I do it for Mario. Anyway, hello, all. Welcome to Wednesday Night Generational Change. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter. What do you mean by Mario?
Our friend Mario in the chat, who always likes when we do that. He always
here.
likes the Seinfeld intro.
Thank you, Chris. Much appreciated. Good to have you here. It's a big day. Obviously, this is going to be a very important conversation. This has been a group that we've wanted to get for a while, simply because labor is the future. If we have one.
Well, and this is really going to the source. Like, we're really going to the source. This is like, we're being like journalists almost.
Yeah. Oh,
this is going to the source. So there's 4 people, right, that are coming on.
4 guys coming on
that are part of 4 different of the unions that are part of the railroad unions that we talk about. I believe there's 12 total.
Yes.
And so we're having guys from 4 of those unions. That's really cool, actually.
Yeah, this is a very big deal.
Yeah, and I'm not entirely sure, how high up the food chain these guys are and what they know as far as the political stuff, but I'm definitely very interested in hearing about their work stuff, their labor stuff.
Well, what exactly, I think in many ways, does they have to do politically anyway? As far as I'm concerned, labor is its own, I don't want to say it's its own, I guess in a way it's its own political entity. What they represent is workers.
Right. No. What I mean is in terms of not what's going on at in the room with Joe Biden and that nonsense.
Love you, Double K.
But more in terms of from the worker perspective, not from the management perspective of the union. I guess we need both.
It will be interesting, Rob. It will be interesting. So make sure you smash that like button. Let's get this out there. There's one story I think we should cover before they come on at 9:00.
Okay. Which is, what do you want to chat about?
I think it's important to talk about, not because I think the context of the story has any real relevancy here, because it's just downright stupid.
Because I was just watching something interesting on PBS. That was very interesting.
Well,
that I wanted to make just a quick comment about. I don't know. Is that okay? No, talk about this if you want to talk about what.
Okay. So I think it's very interesting what happened on social media today, even though I think most of this stuff is completely overblown.
Is that Greta Thunberg?
Yes, it is Greta Thunberg. And so for those of you who obviously are paying attention to the gossip, and I do my best not to, but I think in this case it's important to talk about it because it isn't so much about what was said. It's about the actions of the individual that a lot of people seem to envy for whatever reason. And that, of course, is Andrew Tate. I think Andrew Tate is more or less the definition of toxic masculinity.
I don't even know who that is. Who is that? Who's Andrew? I don't know who that is.
Well, he's a former, I guess he's like a former, like an MMA fighter, I guess, is what he did.
Okay.
But he's a very wealthy man, evidently. And so his wealth was made, or apparently a significant portion of his wealth is made by managing an OnlyFans business empire, if you will.
Okay, good for him. So
basically, well, not necessarily. Again, the one thing you don't necessarily know about OnlyFans, especially because I believe Tate is outside the U.S., is whether or not there's sexual exploitation and things like that that's going on.
That may or may not be, but that's not what we're talking about. Like, stick to the facts of the case. Whether or not this guy was involved in that is not what the point is. And if he wants to make money in OnlyFans, goody for him.
Well, Andrew Tate decided to make tag Greta Thunberg in a post today, bragging about how he has 33 cars, including a Bugatti W16 80-liter quad turbo, which I believe is like $2 million. My 2 Ferrari 812 Competizione have 6.5-liter V12s.
I want to know who's that handles that, because that's about this guy you're talking about.
This is just the start. Please provide your email address so I can send a complete list of my car collection and their respective enormous emissions.
And there's this picture of him with what I'm assuming is his Bugatti.
That's his Bugatti. And so
that's grotesque. That's grotesque.
And so Greta Thunberg comes back at him with, yes, please do enlighten me. Email me at smalldickenergy@getalife.com.
I didn't see that was from her. I just saw this one.
Now let's keep in mind. Now let's keep in mind, because I think this is very relevant to the
That's
story.
awesome sauce. That's
What's-
awesome sauce.
So what's very relevant here is the fact that Andrew Tate is almost 37 and Greta Thunberg is 19. So
and
he's
also on the spectrum, by the way.
Greta's on the spectrum.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
She's so this is somebody on a spectrum that generally has people having like social issues and stuff. I gotta say, Greta, you're on it. Like, this guy is such a douchebag.
Well, to say
Small
that
dick energy. Good for you, Greta.
yeah, and to say that he's a douchebag would be an understatement,
so
because the guy has a history of saying very despicable things regarding how to deal with women, including physically assaulting them. But why people feel that this is a guy that you want to gravitate to? Yeah, I get it. He's a tough guy. He fights and things like that. But there are lots of guys who fight and do it because it's their career. It's what they do, with people their own size and, weight, if you
this
will.
guy. Woo.
But this guy,
But
I'm
this
telling you,
douche.
he has got an endless supply of the type of language that is so
It's
coercive.
good call on her part.
And I'm the
'cause
last person
the
to
first
say,
thing I think when I see that is small penis.
well,
That's the first thing that comes to mind with this guy.
even if you have one, but the fact that he says, I've got a fleet of cars that are gas guzzlers, it's like, what are you trying to put? Like,
He's just being a dick. Just being a dick.
yeah. And that is certainly something he's made a very big habit out of. Yeah. Agreed,
Yeah, it's
Karen.
gross.
It is gross. But the problem is that there are a lot of men out there that, for whatever reason, one way or another, find Andrew Tate appealing. They find his brand of.
There's a
It's
lid
not-
for every pot.
Yeah, but the problem is that there's a lot of people who envy him, who think that he's.
There's a lot of people that envy Elon Musk. There's a lot of people that listen to people like Ben Shapiro. There's a lot of people that are that enjoy listening and respecting douchebags. I don't know why.
It's fair.
They need leadership, I guess. These people need leadership, and they look at their own little weakling selves and they seek that out in someone else who's weakling like them and has somehow made money by being so. I don't know. All of those people, I feel like those are all people that need to be punched in the vagina. When I think of people like Elon Musk and just people like there's him, I don't even know who that is other until just now.
Well, again, I could, like
Ben
I said,
Shapiro definitely could punch him in the vagina.
Well, Ben Shapiro is definitely overcompensating.
That's what I'm
sure.
saying. That's my
But
point.
somebody like Andrew Tate, who was a successful fighter in his own right, has certainly evolved, or is it devolved would be the right word, into the worst form of human scum, as far as I'm concerned. He's all about the excess. He's a braggadocious type of Trump, only in this case, he brags about hurting women.
So what we're saying is that a misogynistic, like, basically bully
Yes.
does fighting for a living. Yes, I get that. And that's why, and let me say, people it doesn't matter. The kind of person, honestly, who wants to do that kind of fighting, that's a certain kind of person, just like it's a certain kind of person who wants to go into law enforcement or there's certain kind of people that seek out certain types of careers. And especially when you're past the hobby point. At the hobby point, I kind of get that to some extent, but when you get past the hobby point, you're in that for a very particular reason.
But the whole thing, again, what is the purpose of trying to get Greta Thunberg's attention? Of all the people you want to pick on a teenager,
this is a very, very like misogynistic person. This is somebody who just does not like women.
And do you think that is akin to somebody who's a closet homosexual?
I'm not going to guess on his. I'm just saying I can't tell you what his reasons for being an anti-woman are, but he is. He's just a misogynist.
But I also think that there's a lot of men out there that do hate women, and or don't like the fact that they haven't had success with women, and they see Andrew Tate as sort of a vessel, if you will, for their emotional feelings towards women. So they see him as basically saying the things that
this
they
is a
love to
very,
say.
very small and insecure man. And anybody who would be taunting a teenager who's done nothing but been an environmental activist and a net positive for the world, and that's who you're picking a fight with, speaks volumes. Like, to me, that's a very small man.
And if you had,
like, I don't know what more to say.
And if you had one Bugatti or just one gas guzzling car, and you're like, hey, first of all, the fact that you even felt the need to try to get her attention is just pathetic.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
If you have one, maybe two of these cars that you've spent apparently millions of dollars on, but no, that's not enough. I have
Yes,
to
she did.
I have to let you know that I have a fleet of these cars. I have a fleet because, again, I'm so insecure.
That's
I have
what that
no real
says.
substance. I have to live
I have a
with
fleet of cars.
okay, vanity. Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin. And there's no question that Andrew Tate is all vanity because he has no substance.
Clearly.
Let me show you all these fancy toys that I have. And yes, they are fancy.
Whatever.
But this is, of course, relevant to the degree that, he's somebody who's got a very large platform. And apparently shit posting is just something that, rules the day in many instances. But as one would point out, it has very little, if any, relevance whatsoever to
Exactly.
the real orders of the day.
Double K's. Right?
There are many more serious issues that, we have to deal with. And that, of course, is the fact that we have a labor movement that continues to try to find its direction. And right now we're looking at a situation where, the railroad workers are more or less caught in the eye of the storm, if you will, because whatever semblance of a labor movement we have right now is kind of scattered in a whole bunch of different places. And so ultimately we're trying to bring all of those people together.
That's by design, that we're not supposed to know what's going on. Like, we're not supposed to know.
I definitely agree.
We're not supposed to know that however many 200 plus Starbucks have unionized in how short of a period of time? I forget, like in how long.
It's 200 or something like
yeah,
that.
but in a pretty short period of time.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're not supposed to know this, because if people know that, they'll start getting ideas.
Yeah, and God forbid people got ideas about how to actually collectively build labor.
I got to tell you, I have some ideas.
You do?
I do have ideas.
Well, you'll have to share it with the gentleman.
I'm just not somebody that is in, I'm not in the labor community. I'm a labor sympathizer. So I have ideas, but it has to be an organic labor thing. I am a supporter of the labor movement.
I've done manual labor, and I think everybody should do manual labor, quite frankly.
Well, I mean, yes, I understand that. I'm currently not engaged in manual that community. Labor. Correct. Or any, really.
Fair enough.
I mean, really, I waited tables. I've done a lot of things that was, like that. But no, currently in my current incarnation, I'm not. But I am very sympathetic. I come from labor people. My poppy was a mailman.
Yeah, we're living in a world today where it's much more difficult simply because it used to just be that people were kind of chastised for not having a job or just not working.
Right.
In this case, we're living in a world today where people actually criticize people for having a job that they deem is not good enough. I can't fathom the world where people think
because it makes so much more sense for them to go into lifelong debt to go get a 4-year degree for something that they won't be able to use. That makes so much more sense than having a job where you're actually doing something.
Well, needless to say, this is a conversation that I think we're really looking forward to. And we are going to bring in our first guest. Most of the panel's here, but I want to bring in the gentleman that made this all possible. He is somebody who I've had the pleasure of speaking with and think extremely highly of, as I would for most people that are obviously fighting the good fight. But especially in the labor movement right now, we need the type of leadership that is going to be presented here as part of Railroad Workers United. And that, of course, is Ron Kamanico. I hope I said it right. Ron, welcome to Generational Change.
We're having audio.
Your audio's off, Ron.
Your audio's off.
Make sure your audio's on.
He looks like he's in a cabin.
He's in Reno.
He's in Reno. Looks like he's in a cabin. We're not getting audio.
There should be a on or off button.
Yeah, there's something. All right, how do you want to bring in some, let's bring in some other people and just start. I mean, we need to get, wait, now you're muted. Now you're unmuted, but something is not right with the audio.
Ron, can you hear us? Give us a thumbs up if you can hear us.
Yeah, he hears us.
You can hear us.
Okay, so let's see. It's not us because people are on.
All right, so we will work on that. If need be, Ron, if you want to potentially log out and log back in again, I'm not sure what the audio issue is on your end, but in the meantime, we are going to fill in this panel. And of course, the first gentleman we are going to recognize is somebody from the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division. And that, of course, is Matt Weaver. Welcome to Generational Change.
Hello, you guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can definitely hear you. How are you?
Not too bad. How about yourself?
We're good. Where are you from? Where are you? What part of the country?
I am just east of Toledo, Ohio, where CNO, Toledo Terminal, NYC, PRR railroads all come. It's a nice little railroad area here.
I'm actually familiar with that railroad because I once stayed at a bed and breakfast in Sandusky, and we checked into this place and there were earplugs on the sides of the bed. And I was thinking, that's so cute. Why? That's so considerate. How did they know that my husband snores? No, it was for the train that came through at like 3 times through the middle of the night, literally shaking the entire bed and breakfast. But anyway, I digress. So I'm very familiar with the trains in that area.
Absolutely. That's the old NF in Western there.
Yeah, it is.
We're going to bring in as well a gentleman who is a retired engineer from BNSF, Jeff Kurtz. Welcome to Generational Change. Your audio is off, Jeff.
Your audio is off too.
How's that? Can you hear me?
There we go. There we go. Okay, so we can, let's just, you have like a serious list of like to talk items that you want to hit.
Yeah, this is definitely, obviously, Ron, I'm sure will be on in a minute. And of course, we're also expecting one other gentleman to join us, Nick Wirtz, hopefully will be here shortly. And so guys, obviously this has been it's been a very difficult few months, I should say, to say the least, dealing with this whole negotiating back and forth. So I guess, why don't we start with, what brought this about in terms of at least attempting to, try to do something substantial regarding your labor rights? It shouldn't even be a question that railroad workers should have paid sick leave. Seems kind of silly to even think about, but needless to say, we do not live in a country right now that really values labor as much as we like to claim that we do. So try to make that significant change is obviously going to take a series of battles. But what was the impetus for you guys to sort of band together and realize, yeah, we got to start taking control of our situation, because the labor movement has been quite dire for some time?
Well, I wholeheartedly believe cross-craft solidarity is the key to winning national negotiating. We've had separate coalitions all along in my whole career, 1994, and the divide and conquer tactics by the railroads are strong. So it came around where we were collectively by the AFL-CIO Transportation Trades Division or Department, and it was a nice thing to be under the same umbrella. Then as they started offering different items with the PEB recommendation came out, crafts signed on, ratified piecemeal here and there, and that seemed to fight us again. And then as negotiations and our timeline moved, the contract was imposed, and it's very unfortunate because we have no paid sick days. And leading into this pandemic, we were told essential. And I was given paper even last week with a snowstorm. I said, if you're pulled over during a weather emergency, level 3 snow emergency routine, show the officer this paperwork and say that you're essential to get commerce moving Ohio area. And then we're at the bargaining table and we go from essential to just with a look at a ticker tape, just like that. The shareholders, they're not worth that much.
I can't imagine how we've come to the point where, you've seen for so many years sort of the everything that's transpired since Reagan fired the air traffic controllers on August 20th, 1981. And it's just basically been this long, endless nightmare of trying to get some semblance of a labor movement in this country, because as of right now, we don't really we could have one, but it's kind of broken up right now. And I see this as, if we don't unite around the railroad workers, then when are we ever going to unite?
I feel so infuriated from what you were just saying, actually. So you're not essential. They don't think you're essential. Oh, I think you should show them how essential you are. See, let me tell. I think it would be glorious. I think everybody should be so madly inconvenienced and realize who really is essential. That's what I think.
And that's where I really am excited about teachers who are stepping up, coming together, and making great leaps and bounds in labor. I would like to see rail labor follow in their steps and come together. Solidarity is the key to working class power, and we seem to have lost that in the divide and ship where they have us fighting each other.
Yeah.
Jeff, Ron, your thoughts?
Well, I would just like to say, talking to our local people around here, it's not even the sick days that are the big stumbling block. It's getting days off, period. I mean, we've had people penalized for things like getting in a car wreck. A guy was a mile from work. A woman that had no license, no insurance, ran out in front of him, totaled his car. His supervisor wouldn't let him come to work. He was penalized for that. We've had people that were penalized because their kids were sick and they wanted to be with their kids. One gentleman, his son had a collapsed lung. He was in the hospital, and they were not going to hear of him taking off work for that because it was Super Bowl weekend. So this fight is more. It comes down to more basic things than just sick pay. I mean, it's we've got when I was working, I was head of our legislative department. We did a lot of work as far as health and safety, what the hours that we work do to the people that work them. Being on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, what that does to a person as far as fatigue, as far as stress. And we've seen that around here since the implementation of BNSF high vis. We've actually had 4 people die. We've had 2 people die on an engine, one from a stroke, one from a heart attack. A young man, he was a local chairman, which would be the equivalent of a chief steward. He was 49 years old. He died in his sleep, probably because of the hours he works. Had another young man commit suicide. This can all be traced back to the conditions that these people are working under. So this is more basic than just getting paid sick days.
You're actually suggesting that people should treat workers like humans. And I have this thought that people should get time off because of like www.noneofyourbusiness.com. Like, yeah. This is very infuriating. And none of this surprises me, by the way. Like, I'm not remotely surprised by this, but just very disgusted. Ron, do you have audio now? Can we hear you?
You tell me.
Yeah, audio. Yeah. Now something happened. Now something went away.
How about now?
There you go.
There you go. So please, Ron.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, it's all good.
I'm not sure what the original question is, but listen.
Well, just talk about your entry into like where this started when you all sort of started coming together in this most recent. I mean, it's been going on for a couple of years, though, right? Like this last negotiation.
Yeah, and as some of the media coverage in recent months has made clear, there was a great article, and I forget which outlet put it. This is 30 years in the making, and I hired him with the industry about the same time Matt did back in the mid 90s. And at that time, I was amazed at the conditions of employment in terms of train and engine craft. You just worked. but at least you could mark off when you wanted to, when you had had enough. And there were times where I would mark off for a week. I didn't get paid, but I didn't get disciplined either. And that's all gone away. And so the crux of the matter is that working people more and more have come to the conclusion that you have the right to make a living, and you also have the right to a life as well. Like, what a novel concept. 100 years ago, there was a strike in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and they called it the Bread and Roses strike. And the women took to the leadership of the strike, and they basically said, of course we strike and we fight for bread, but we want roses too, which is to say we want a life. We want to live. We want to have time with our family, friends, time to develop ourselves as human beings. And this is what the 8-hour day fight was about, starting in 1886. And the famous demonstrations all over the world where labor came together and united with the understanding that if any worker was to achieve an 8-hour day, that most likely we would all need to achieve it. And so this quality of life has all of a sudden propelled to the forefront as the big class 1 rail carriers have pushed and pushed and pushed for 3 decades now, well, longer actually, and have taken away more and more manpower, have greater and greater expectations from Wall Street that everyone who's on the payroll shows up to work, and not just to work 30 or 40 hours a week, but 50, 60, or 70. Because Wall Street doesn't like more workers on the payroll than absolutely necessary. And so we're in this situation, and then throw the pandemic into the mix, and you heard for 3 or 4 months, finally, it was music to all of our ears that people who stock shelves in grocery stores are essential. People who picked up your trash are essential. And people who worked on the railroad, these are essential workers, not just out of some jingoistic expression, but without us, nothing else works. Like the great song Solidarity Forever, without our brain and muscle, not a single wheel can turn. And in the case of the railroad industry, literally, and if those wheels aren't turning, nothing else is going to happen. Well, we all took this to heart, whether you were teachers or trash collectors or store shelf stockers, railroad workers, or what have you. And by God, if we're essential and the economy can't do without us, then what in the hell are we doing coming to work when we're sick? What the hell are we doing being told that we're essential when in fact you're treating us like we're disposable? And so I think a number of things came together here in the last few months that convinced railroad workers we've had enough and we're not going to take it. Now, we're not ready to go on a wildcat illegal strike against the wishes of both political parties, all 3 branches of government, some of the most powerful corporations in the world, and our own union leadership. But the fact of the matter remains, the vast majority of U.S. railroad workers were ready, willing, and able to strike. And it's unfortunate that we actually were not allowed to, because I think it would have corrected decades of injustice and actually solved some of the huge problems that are facing the rail industry in this country. As it is, nothing has been solved, and we limp along with a very, very crippled infrastructure in this country.
We're speaking with Railroad Workers United, Jeff Kurtz, Ron Kinukow, and of course, Matt Weaver. From my perspective, and I'm looking at this from a couple things that I saw the other day, which I thought was very important. Number one, I saw a documentary regarding Boeing and how that corporation operated up until they decided to merge with McConnell and Douglas, and that was in the late 90s. And then, of course, we see what's happening right now with Southwest Airlines. And it's just pretty clear to me that the second Wall Street shareholders get their hooks in any line of work, whatever it may be, is when the work will suffer immensely, because it's all about the bottom line. And the bottom line involves taking from one and passing it off to the other. That's how it works within this system. That's how it works with the shareholders of the railroad workers. And the same is true for any of these other major industries. Can you talk about the effect that Wall Street and perhaps just overall deregulation of these industries has caused to the detriment of the workers, especially in your line of work?
And that's exceptionally true with precision scheduled railroading, PSR. Hunter Harrison brought that to the end, and it's all profit over people, higher profit margins, doing more with less. Or lost upwards of 20% of their manpower. The men and women labor. We've gone from 150,000 to 117,000 rail workers, and profit margin went from CP to CN to CSX, and then all class 1 railroads are by the horns, and here we are doing more with, and the workforce is suffering.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me that it's privatized to the point that we're concerned with shareholders, but yet the president can come in and basically just like, shut everything down. So like, in other words, why aren't they then capable of subsidizing what needs to happen if your industries are not capable of providing for their own workers? Like, I don't, this is very frustrating.
Well, what's even more ironic is that these captains of industry will tell you, stay out of our business, let us run our business. But when the workers threatened to go on strike, and they were on the verge of going on strike, the first thing that these people did was use the administration as their human resources and public relations department. They forced everybody back to work. Warren Buffett wrote a letter to the president telling the president not to let these guys go on strike. Every railroad followed the same procedure. They, were imploring the government, go after these people and make sure they don't go on strike. I've been, I hired out in 1974. I'm a third generation railroader. And I'll tell you, in 1974, I had a much better job as far as quality of life than these guys have now. So we've got to basically go back to the future, because these railroad CEOs and people like Warren Buffett, they figured out how to monetize our grief.
Yeah. Yeah. As Jeff is saying, even when I hired in 20 years after Jeff, the old heads, the old railroaders that I would talk to who had been on the railroad for 30 years, 40 years, dating back to the 50s and 60s, they would tell me, they'd say, oh yeah, you'd never mark off, call in, because you didn't want to miss the fun. You didn't want to miss the excitement, the joy of actually railroading. And granted, things were different in a lot of ways. But, the railroad has consistently, over my time on the railroad, has taken back more and more and more. And the irony, especially when it comes to the class ones, is that the rail industry was not always this profitable. There were some lean times in the 60s and 70s. And as the railroad came out of that in the 80s with operating ratios in the 0.9, then it dropped into the 0.8 range. And then through my tenure, and same with Matt, into the 7 and 6. And now the target of these class ones is literally a 50% operating ratio. And of course, this doesn't mean much to most people, but all that really means is for every dollar that we take 50 cents profit. There's no other industries in this country that are running at this level of profitability. The trucking industry, many of the big trucking companies, I believe, are making a 10, 15% profit margin. Railroads are up there with real estate and banking, and some circles believe that railroads are the most profitable industry in the country. When Warren Buffett bought BNSF, he realized, holy hell, it's a monopoly. I can't go wrong. It's totally essential to every other industry in this country, especially the movement of fossil fuels, which Warren is into in a big way. And so it was obvious he was going to make a lot of money. And then 5 years into it, he announced the BNSF had made him far more money than he ever even realized it was going to make him. And so in this context, the rail industry is moving less freight than it did 16 years ago. And here is really the crux of the matter. If you're a citizen of this country, if you're a shipper, if you're concerned about inflation, if you're concerned about the environment, you should be outraged, because rail is the most efficient, the most environmentally sensitive, the safest means of transportation known to humanity. The rest of the world is forging ahead with electrification of railroads and massively infusing capital. I remember a few years ago, Spain announced $40 billion a year investment to link every city in Spain with high-speed rail, which means double-track railroads. In this country, there's no double tracking, very limited siding extensions, no electrification, because the rail industry has figured out that to make short-run record profits, you don't do any of that stuff. You simply move less freight, you gouge your existing customers, you provide really poor service to the rest, and there's nothing much they can do about it. You cut maintenance, you contract out work, you furlough and otherwise get rid of tens of thousands of other employees, and we're on this massive cost-cutting treadmill towards super profitability. And so far, it's not sustainable, but so far it's working for them. And the stockholders are thrilled. They made record profits through the Great Recession of 2008. They made record profits right through the pandemic. And so it's disgraceful, and every American citizen should be extremely concerned about this great resource called the American rail system, the biggest in the world, and yet we are not putting it to very good use.
Needless to say, what you guys do is tremendously important, and we are tremendously grateful for what you do. But Ron, you brought up a really great point. If there's one thing that significantly hampers us, not just on the home front, but also on the international stage, especially when competing with China, is they are unbelievably ahead of us when it comes to high-speed rail. We have made literally no efforts whatsoever in so many ways in this country to really get on the ball regarding what could be a tremendous boom to the economy. I'm wondering, from all of your perspectives, how much the railroad oligarchs are the ones standing in the way of us having high-speed rail in this country? And if so, what is the motivation for them to stop it from happening?
From what I see that. Go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry, brother.
No, go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
I see in Toledo, I see Amtrak being held by at the Diamond. I see only in Michigan, Amtrak own the tracks. You know, they run on freight's tracks. Freight gets the often enough on swing bridges. Where I've worked on bridges. Boats are supposed to get no, not really. Trains moving freight, making money is what the priority is. This privatized industry. I see that I keep clicking out. I don't know, losing my feed too.
One of the things that I worked on when I was with our union, I was the Iowa State Legislative Board Chairman, which meant that I was the head of legislative matters and safety here in the state of Iowa, was exactly what you're talking about, the high-speed rail and the movement of freight and how we could make it more efficient. We did actually do that in the union for a while. We looked at that, and one of the things that we found was that if we adopted a system of higher speed rail, not necessarily the 150 mile per hour and above, because you get into things like restricted grade crossing, access separation, where you have to close crossings up. It starts to cost a lot of money to do that. But for a lot less money, we could run 110 mile an hour passenger trains alongside of freight trains at higher speeds. And we make the whole system much more efficient. for 500-mile trips, which Americans do a lot of 500-mile trips. We could do this for little to nothing. In fact, we might be able to make the system actually pay for itself. And then I was in the state legislature. I was a state representative here for 2 years, and I could see how we aren't utilizing some of the short line railroads that interchange with the Class 1 railroads, because the Class 1s were shutting them out. You know, the people like Warren Buffett, Jim Foote, and Lance Fritz, those people were shutting them out because they wanted to run these trains straight through without stopping in the small communities. Well, a lot of these small communities actually became communities because of railroads. And now the railroad has just completely shut them out. So now they're in the process of drying up these communities again. And it's the short-term money. I think it was the first quarter of this year, BNSF ran 16% less freight, and they made 7% more money, and Warren Buffett was thrilled. This is where we are.
Yeah. So here's a specific example of where the freight rail industry is actively impeding the advancement of passenger rail in this country. First of all, Amtrak has a skeletal network. Most of its trains operate on freight railroads that are called host railroads. They're not very nice hosts in most cases. The trains are extremely delayed, and it has been made worse by precision scheduled railroading, which has as one of its MOs is to run extremely long trains because you get the economies of scale, you use less locomotives, and you use, importantly, less crews, less labor. And as a result, these big 3-mile long trains don't fit into sidings, and they take up what's called a huge amount of track capacity. So if it was 3 short trains that all could accelerate quickly and decelerate quickly and could fit into sidings, and you could have things called rolling meets where neither train in either direction actually stops but reduces speed and passes each other while in motion, you have a much more fluid and efficient rail network. But as we've seen, the rail industry is not necessarily interested in a fluid and efficient, fast-paced rail network. They're interested in short-term profits, and if 3-mile long trains can increase profits, then by God, it's going to be 3-mile long trains. So let's take a look at the Gulf, where Amtrak for years has been attempting to restore service between New Orleans and Mobile, Alabama, after Hurricane Katrina knocked out that CSX route, I don't know, 15 or so years ago now. Well, the Norfolk Southern and the CSX, the 2 big Class 1 railroads in the East, have been vehemently opposed. They say basically you give us hundreds and hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to put in new infrastructure in this railroad, and we will be able to handle those 2 little teeny tiny sports car trains. I mean, the difference is between like a little MG sports car and a big giant semi. Even that is not the comparison between a 4-car Amtrak train and a 200-car 3-mile long freight train. But this is, this is what they're balking at. And if you look at the freight moved on that piece of track, there's no more train movements today than there were 15 years ago. So what's the problem? If you look at my piece of railroad that I operate over out here in the Sierra Nevada, there were many, many, many more train movements 50 years ago. I mean, we could go back to steam engine days, for God's sake, with unsignaled territory where train operators every 10 or 20 miles along the railroad track handed up paper orders that were caught on the fly by the engineer and the conductor. And with every movement over the Sierra Nevada needing a shove by a helper locomotive. So you had dozens and dozens of train movements up and down the mountain. The railroad today is moving far less trains over the Sierra Nevada. But try to run an additional Amtrak train, of course, between the Bay Area and Reno, and the host railroad, in this case the Union Pacific, would say we simply cannot do that. So it's kind of tragic that there was times 50, 60, 70 years ago where you may have had 3, 4, 5 passenger trains running in each direction every day, along with dozens and dozens of freight trains. But we can't do that anymore, given the operating model that the railroads are using. So yeah, in answer to your question, the freight railroads, the class ones, are actively mitigating against potential expansion, not just of high-speed rail in this country, but of any kind of expansion of rail. As we pointed out, it's been almost a generation, and they're moving less freight than they did almost 20 years ago. So they obviously have no interest in expanding. But the nation, the shippers, the industrialists in this country, everybody has an interest in rail expansion. Ironically, except the rail industry itself.
Right. Well, they're hoarding. I mean, they're hoarding all of it for themselves, right? I mean, and the fact that they own, you're saying that they own the tracks. So yeah, and somebody in the comments, I think it was Chris Garrett, said that we should nationalize this, and I'm starting to think that yeah, that's obviously what needs to happen here. Like this is crazy.
But that leads to the bigger issue here, which is the workers still hold the power, and the workers can still shut down the economy if they have to, which I think at this point needs to be done. So I'm curious. Obviously, we all know that the president is not a friend of labor. They go to great lengths to try to pretend like he is. Obviously, that's the power of corporate media, and it just sort of that fast-paced social media world.
Do we have a Labor Party? Do you see a Labor Party? I don't see a Labor Party.
Well, I mean, if Bernie got to the White House,
not since the 90s.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, listen,
I do appreciate the DOT, DOL, and FRA appointees. I can't imagine what Trump would have appointed. So I guess I am tired of voting two evils, but I yearn for a Labor Party too.
Yeah,
if that is the case, then let's say that you guys did collectively decide, okay, that's it, we are going to strike, even if it means breaking the law. What would that look like? I'm curious as to what the ramifications would be, what the president would do, what the unions would do. How would this look if you guys just decided, we have to do something, because if we don't, labor is already going down by the head in this country as a whole. At what point do you feel that there is sort of this cross solidarity, as you mentioned, with the teachers, but it can't just be the teachers, it's the postal workers, it's the nurses, it's the AFL-CIO, it's the CWA, it's the SCIU. It's a question of, when does it become a collective labor movement where everyone stands up and says, we're not taking this anymore, we're losing our country literally every day, and we've got to try something, even if it is at the risk of it ultimately becoming a serious legal problem.
Well, I think it was 1951 or 1952 when the railroads, when the rail workers threatened to go on strike. Wow. Harry Truman threatened to draft all of them. And so I think you would see something like that, probably. You would see something pretty extreme, and it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't take a page out of that book. So that's probably what we would be looking at. I personally can't see them allowing this to happen. I mean, I think it would be, I'm fairly certain, especially with what happened this last time. I think that the people that actually work out there would be exposed to some pretty dire consequences.
I still kind of see it, though, as them calling your bluff. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a career, and you guys want to protect your careers. But at the same time, there is still this need to make the economy function. And they know that you have the capability of doing things that not anybody, electrical engineers are not just everywhere. And people being able to work on the railroads are just not everywhere. So if you had the ability to stop it from happening, I think that could be a very big deal. I also think that there's a lot of people that are starting to get their sea legs regarding the ability to actually form a union. and make that so that it's possible regarding, let's say, even something as simple as the Starbucks workers, but maybe something much more significant like Amazon workers. A lot of Amazon products obviously are transported by, obviously regular shipping cars, but at the same time, there's also the railroad industry that plays a role there. And then, of course, I think the biggest and the worst offenders in the country are the Walton family regarding Walmart. And I would love to see those workers get together in whatever capacity is possible. So I am curious as to, what you guys kind of see as sort of the future evolution of this, because it is very scary at this point. We don't have a Labor Party. We are looking at a possible DeSantis presidency.
Wait. We have Mayo Pete as the Secretary of Transportation for you. So
Yeah.
that's something.
Really,
that's something.
Talk about a political appointment that had nothing to do with actual merit for the job.
I couldn't let you not mention that as part of the perfect storm equation.
Sure. So I think there's a lot of elements here, and I know it's kind of all over the place, but do you think that a strike is possible? And whatever capacity that may look like. I am deeply concerned for each and every one of you. I'm deeply concerned for workers all over this country. I have been for a very long time. And I despise the Democrats more than the Republicans, because the Republicans don't pretend. You know exactly where they stand. They want the Chamber of Commerce. They are on the side of management.
Well, except you have like the Trump populist, we do care about labor sort of facade.
Yeah, but you're not going to get that because neither side gives a shit.
Well, yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah.
They're not going to pretend like they may feign ignorance of saying that they do, but it's like listening to, I always say the worst type of people in politics are comfortable liberals in the suburbs, because for them, they say that they care up to a point. The second you inconvenience them in any way is the second they will throw you to the wolves and say, do as you're told, do not affect my ability to live comfortably. That's what it is for them. And so I worry about your ability, not just right now, but what the future holds if a major stand isn't taken at some point.
Yeah.
And if you guys do stand, we will stand with you, and we'll bring as many people with you as humanly possible.
I got my vest. I'm ready. I'm ready to go.
And that is exactly that's exact position of the PEB recommendation felt. They were like, oh, afraid that you'll disrupt commerce in America. Take this.
Yeah. That's the point. If it was convenient, then that wouldn't count. Then the whole point is to be inconvenienced.
I mean, look, the oligarchs have been inconveniencing Americans for the better part of 2 generations. The policies that were passed, particularly during Reagan's administration and Clinton's administration, have had untold amounts of damage to this country, whether it starts with obviously firing the air traffic controllers, whether it is the removal of the fairness doctrine or the reduction of our top marginal tax rate, whether it is NAFTA and normal trade relations with China, whether it is the Telecom Act of 96, or the ultimate, which still doesn't get talked about enough, is the removal of Glass-Steagall, which just completely gave free rein to Wall Street and the major banks to do whatever they wanted. And they're still doing it now. And it just seems to get worse and worse and worse. And everyone knows that it's almost like a sinking ship. It's like we're on the Titanic and we got to get off. And there's just too many people that are not recognizing that without labor being strong in this country, we are doomed. We are completely doomed. And you can't drink oil and you can't eat money. At some point, somebody's got to ring, the alarm bells and say something's got to be done. I just don't know who's going to be able to do that. But I do think collectively building a national labor movement, even a national labor council, as we've talked about, I think that's something that could be of great benefit. How do you guys see it?
So there's a slogan in the working class movement, in the struggle, which says it's our solidarity versus theirs. And if you look at the solidarity that they have, the National Carriers Conference Committee, they didn't divide up. They didn't have the different class ones go this way and that way. Also, the Republican and the Democratic Party are more or less in lockstep. The vote wasn't that skewed like it was 30 years ago, but we didn't actually go on strike. Had we gone on strike, the vote would have been way, way, way more skewed. It was 400 to 5 30 years ago to basically break that strike/lockout in 1992. And so there's a huge amount of solidarity with employers. The Chemical Shippers Association actually was critical of the rail industry in a rare glimpse at a break in solidarity of the ruling class. But notice that they actually led the coalition of shippers, hundreds of them, that basically said to Biden, you're going to have to make sure this strike doesn't happen. So even though they kind of let it slip that they wanted the class once to give those proletarians a handful of sick days, when push came to shove, the shippers all lined up with the rail carriers, the rail carriers that have given them lousy service for years now. They lined up with them. And so we see the solidarity on the part of capital is quite impressive. Now let's look at our solidarity. We have 12 different unions on the railroad. Supposedly we were in one big rail coalition for the first time in history, and the rail unions bragged vociferously about this in June when all 12 were in the same boat. We didn't really have a coalition. It was nonsense, because as soon as the PEB came out, everyone went in everyone's different direction. And there was some vociferous cries from the rank and file, but we were told very quickly by the union leadership, no, fellas, this is all within the playbook. We had decided in advance every union has the right to settle on whatever terms it wants, which in effect is saying that every union, every craft has the right to scab on their fellow workers on the railroad. We have inherited a craft union system that is 150 years out of date. In the 1890s, it was out of date. There was an attempt by numerous railroad union leaders and most of the rank and file at the time to create an alternative vision and an alternative structure called an industrial union, where all railroad workers would be together in a railroad workers union. For various reasons, it failed, largely because the solidarity of the ruling class was so powerful. The federal government conspired, sent in troops, shot up a bunch of strikers. They blacklisted ARU members. They arrested the leaders, threw them in jail, confiscated the files, and so forth. But that's another story. But the point is, there's not going to be a successful illegal strike at this point on the railroads. We've had successful illegal strikes in this country. Talking about illegality and strikes in the larger context, obviously, sitting at Woolworth's lunch counters in Greenboro, North Carolina in the 1960s, in effect was a strike, in effect was illegal, and that changed the way the country run. And as my old friend Ann Feeney, a labor folk singer, used to sing, nothing changes if you don't break the law. And in fact, so many of the laws in this country that once were the law of the land would now be considered quite illegal and immoral because people challenge them. So the miners challenged Jimmy Carter in 1978 and refused to work, despite the fact that Carter invoked the Taft-Hartley Act and attempted to order them back to work. Subway workers in New York City have violated the Taylor Law on 3 occasions, I believe, in the last 50 years, which says public employees can't strike. We saw Arizona teachers, West Virginia teachers, and I think Oklahoma teachers in the last 5 or 6 years engage in illegal strikes. The Postal Workers Union was organized in 1970 through an illegal strike. So it can be effective, and it can right a lot of historic wrongs. And we may see an illegal railroad workers strike at some point in the future in this country, but it ain't going to be today or tomorrow. And that's partly because the rank and file and the leadership are not on the same side on this thing. The leadership of our unions wanted this contract, attempted to sell us this contract, and you had a sizable chunk of the rank and file who voted in favor of this contract. You need a consensus. You need to build a majority, and you need that solidarity. One of the things that Railroad Workers United has been emphatic about since our existence over the last 15 years is that you need to have all railroad workers united together so that we can act in concert with each other. Having these 12 different craft unions all going in their own silly direction is a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for weakness and division. It's not a union. We have 12 clubs on the railroad, and that's what people have to understand. A union is all for one and one for all. An injury to one is an injury to all. We don't really have that on the railroad right now, and that's step one. We have to have a unified workforce on the railroad that can act as one. And until we get it, we are going to continue to operate with one hand behind our back. And I'd love to hear Matt Weaver talk a little bit about the All Railcraft Coalition, which was an attempt to build a sort of a prototype of what could be done potentially inside the rail labor.
And that was in the last round of bargaining when I was in the internal organizing group of the BMWE. We had all craft coalitions around the nation: Kansas City, Toledo, Chicago, Detroit, Miami, San Antonio, across California. And we had at one point in time 11 internal organizers across the nation doing this cross craft sections, working with all crafts. I mean, I had never seen a fireman and oiler, the local laborers, before I joined that and met up with a group in Roanoke, Virginia. You know, that cross from the ground up, from the rank and file, was very powerful, and also to make happen. But boy, it was well worth it. There was a lot of hours poured into that, but the returns are hard to be seen, though, because how do you put a monetary value on it? This latest PB recommendation imposed agreement was better than the contracts, but is it what makes the working class strong? I don't think so.
I think you guys have done a job that, again, frankly, is thankless at times. We tend to kind of see things happening before they do. I think that the presidential election of 2024 is going to be very ugly. I was pretty confident that it was going to be Ron DeSantis before this happened. Now that it has happened, it leaves absolutely no doubt in my mind whatsoever. And the fact that Joe did what he did when he could have easily just let the workers and the shareholders duke it out themselves. Instead, he decided that I'm going to adhere to the will of the corporate oligarchs that fund the political machine that is this country. And all to the detriment of people who are just trying to live, with dignity. And it hurts me to no end because I have, working class roots. There was a time in my life where I didn't have much, and I know what that struggle's like. And just to have a job that makes you feel that you're living in dignity is just so far and few between for so many people today. And for the president to do what he did is just so unforgivable. And the fact that there are so many people that have lined up to defend him, to make it seem like, oh, it's all the GOP's fault. No, he didn't have to do anything. It's never needed to happen in the first place. And the fact that it did happen, the distrust that labor should have for both parties, quite frankly, is pretty significant. So my last question to you guys is, what do you expect to happen in 24? Do you think that Biden will be legitimately challenged if he is going to run again in terms of a primary? And do you see a continued growing national labor movement, even in all of the ruckus that's going on in terms of this next major election coming up?
Well, I see some hopeful signs within my former union, the BLET. We are, in fact, it was the BLET president that pretty well led the coalition that came up with this tentative agreement, which was basically the PEB with a couple of other things thrown in that did absolutely nothing to improve this tentative agreement. But he's no longer with us because the membership threw him out. And I think that tells me that people are starting to pay attention. Is Biden going to be challenged? I think he is going to be challenged, Now, if we don't get too deep in the weeds as far as oh God, I'm trying to to my way of thinking, economics is the most important thing. And I've had this conversation with friends of mine in the LGBTQ community, and with people of color. I said, in politics, you see that these are marginalized groups, and I tell them, I can't make people like you, but if we do something about your economic situation, it makes a lot of your problems easier to solve. So that's how we build, I think, movements. We get with marginalized. I mean, I consider all of us as union members and railroaders marginalized. And if we can't see that we've got more in common with people of color and some of the other marginalized groups, there's no hope for us. And I think that's where our path lies.
Yeah, we've always said that we think the common denominator is labor. That's the one thing, and the parties are both failing. I look at this and I'm thinking, like, from your perspective, what are workers supposed to do in terms of their political voice? I mean, obviously the electoral process is only one part of the equation, and it's very sad to me that there aren't more people that are inside that system, that are in Congress, that are not out there with you guys and speaking out for you. It's bad enough that our president is just like, as somebody just called him, a scab, I guess. But like, nobody in the system seems to be helping you in any way. Like, where do you go? Where do you even know who to support? Like, who is there anybody that helps you?
Well, what's been fascinating is the degree of solidarity and support that just came pouring out. I think it was a shock. I've been involved in the labor movement and activism for 40 years, and it was surprising to me. The outpouring of support of just random messages, voicemails, texts, emails, just stating, hey, I'm a retired this, that, or the other. I'm an airline pilot. I'm a teacher. I'm a nurse. I support you guys. Let us know if there's anything we can do. We didn't even ask people for donations, and they came rolling in. Um, the just incredible statements of support from a number of unions, including the postal workers, the flight attendants, the steel workers, the United Electrical, and others. Many of this completely unsolicited. And so people are watching and paying attention. When the poop was hitting the fan there right around the first of the month, and it looked like Biden was potentially going to sign a legislation to stop the strike, it sort of escalated to the point where dozens and scores of emails and donations. Somebody suggested, they said, you guys should do a GoFundMe campaign. We haven't done one with Railroad Workers United now for 4 or 5 years. We set one up December 1st, or I think it was December 2nd. I knew the next morning, after it had raised $3,000 overnight, it was going to reach our goal, and we just reached a goal of $25,000. People don't even know who we are, haven't even heard of Railroad Workers United until sometime this past fall. And so there is this huge level of support. Rallies broke out, independent of the unions and independent of Railroad Workers United. Even there was a big rally in Boston of 200 or 300 people to meet Biden later that week after he signed the legislation, I believe it was, protesting his visit to Boston. There was a huge rally in Grand Central Station organized. There's a great video of dozens and dozens of union workers from different unions speaking. So there is this huge level of support. And I hate to say it, but meanwhile, Liz Schuler, the president of the AFL-CIO, in the heat of the battle, where we were pushing to get these 7 days of sick time, literally in the midst of this battle, decided she would finally make a statement, which I believe she hadn't said anything publicly about the railroad workers' struggle the entire time, but felt impulsively stated, why is everybody talking about what's so bad about this contract? I think we need to talk about the good things of this contract. In fact, it's a very good contract. I mean, this is kind of unbelievable that we're seeing the lack of support the higher you get inside the labor movement, inside the established order. And so when change comes, it's going to come just like in 1935. The AFL at the time was dead set opposed to organizing quote unquote unskilled workers in basic industry. It literally took a fist fight where John L. Lewis punched out, I think, William Green at the convention and took the Committee on Industrial Organization out of the AFL and formed the CIO. And then within a few months, literally millions and millions of workers were organizing in factories all across the country. And I think that's what it's going to take. If we wait for the leadership of our unions to decide at this glacial pace that we're going to organize the working class, it's not going to happen. But as we've seen at Starbucks and at Amazon and all sorts of places where we would not necessarily expect to see workers organizing, they're building independent unions. Now, granted, there's a lot of people are neophytes, and a lot of people lack in experience and lack in financial resources. Nevertheless, it's got to be an uprising of millions of workers who, you know, as we were talking earlier, need to finally rise up and say enough is enough. We simply cannot wait any longer as our country is being hijacked more and more and more by the wealthy. So I believe it's going to happen, but I'm not waiting for the Democrats, the Republicans, or actually any political persuasion to lead us. I'm certainly not waiting for corporations, and I'm not waiting for union leaders. The liberation of the working class simply has to be the act of the working class itself.
Couldn't have said it better.
For sure.
And I agree entirely, and that's where I found with the Railroad Workers United coming together, our inaugural convention, the founding convention, Craft Unity. I learned that at the National Labor College with a hazmat, and then train the trainer, go out and talk to fire departments and police, hazmat derailments. But I learned that more with the Railroad Workers United. How do you create this epiphany to make everyone, the working class, understand that it is class conflict that we're dealing with, and we're far stronger if we stick together and preach solidarity rather than partisanship over all these other outside factors?
You know, it's so ironic, Ron, that you brought up, and a great place to close. You brought up Liz Schuler. Even though she's brand new as the head of the AFL-CIO, and it could have potentially been maybe a watershed moment where she could have done something really great, but chose not to. When Jen ran for Congress against one of the most anti-labor Democrats, who's Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the biggest obstacle that Jen faced when she ran was not Debbie. It was Dan Reynolds, the head of the Broward County AFL-CIO, who also doubles as the number 2 in the entire state of Florida as the Treasury Secretary. Now, he was willing to actually break the law, break the bylaws of the union by not granting Jen, who was a viable candidate on the ballot, a screening for endorsement. Okay, he's going to endorse Debbie regardless, obviously, but was willing to prevent having Jen speak to the rank and file of all of the local unions. And why is that? Because Debbie, who was one of, I think, 3 Democrats at the time that voted to fast track the Trans-Pacific Partnership, why would you ever want to have somebody like that have to go up against a candidate like this who is extremely pro-labor? Because then you'd be putting ideas in people's heads about that you can actually have better things. But the labor leadership doesn't, in many instances, have the same interests as those of the rank and file. And that's the major problem of our time. That is the major disconnect that currently exists. How we fight back against that, how we beat that, I'm not entirely sure. But I do think that the more we have these conversations, the more that we cross-pollinate, as Jen likes to say, the more we bring these labor-centric organizations together that are made aware of it, of what's going on, the more that we have sort of this cross-channel of ideas. I think that that's what's ultimately going to solve it in the long run.
We should do it again with the different ones.
Yeah.
We did that at one point. We had on, who did we, I mean, we had it was completely unrelated labor industries that was really cool.
And we'll keep doing that. And Ron, like you said, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but the more we continue to coalesce, the easier it will be. Sometimes it takes a very, unfortunate circumstance like this in order for people to really wake up and realize that, we really got to get our act together. And it may already be too late, but we have to try. And that's why we're here. And that's why we're extremely grateful that you guys came on this evening. If you have any last thoughts, anything that you're working on, any way that people can get involved.
How can people support? I mean, you said you reached your GoFundMe goal.
Sorry.
So you said you reached your GoFundMe goal, but if there's any way that people can still support, I think that the only way we're ever going to really see a general strike is when we have certain safety nets and support systems in place that we don't have in this country. So, in countries like France where they get healthcare, they can strike. Like we don't have that here. So if there's how can people help is what I'm saying, help support your unions.
One of the things that I found that helps is get involved with your local labor chapters.
Okay, well, real quick, the GoFundMe has reached its goal.
Can you hear me? Oh, okay. One of the things that we've done around here with our local labor chapters is we have brought. I think we've got 20 unions involved, and we've learned a lot from each other. We're supporting right now. We've got the Case New Holland workers in Burlington, Iowa, that have been out for 8 months. I traveled to Racine for the rally that they had for them there. The next day, we had a rally in Burlington, Iowa. I think stuff like that builds a lot of solidarity. We had no political leaders talk at this at either one of the rallies, and I was a Democratic lawmaker at one time, but now I say that the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans is the Republicans con you into serving them. The Democrats expect you to serve them, and
that's
good. About
as
close as I can get to truth that I could ever speak. So, but I think get involved with your local labor chapters, interact with other unions, and support them whenever you can.
Yeah, that's what we do local for sure. Like when our local people go out, we will go out and march with them.
And one,
I agree with Jeff. Anything that people can do, to support, if there's any kind of union organizing in your neck of the woods, join the picket line, express solidarity and support. Specifically for railroad workers, if you're interested in Railroad Workers United and our work, including our recently unveiled campaign for railroad nationalization, for public ownership, which we haven't yet talked about, we don't have time, go to our website, railroadworkersunited.org. A pop-up will come up if you want to sign up to get all the news from us on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. You can also donate on that page. We do accept solidarity memberships at a reduced fee from folks outside of the rail industry. And last but not least, if you're unemployed and looking for an interesting job, consider hire out on the railroad. They are hiring right now, and you can work on this struggle from the inside.
That's awesome. I'm actually, I have to go join that. I need to go join Railroad Workers United.
Interestingly enough, we always tip our hats to the iron workers because they were the one local union that was willing to endorse Jen, even
Yeah.
at the risk of severe repercussions, which of course did happen. In
Yeah,
fact,
that didn't go over well.
Well, the one major union here that I think Dan Reynolds was afraid of was the firefighters, and he made it very clear, just for Jen being shown in a social media photograph on their website on a fire truck. And he told them to take that effing photo down. That was the exact words that they used.
Take that photo down.
Yeah. So it's a fight. It's a big fight. But you know what, guys? We're here to fight with you. And, Matt, last word before we go.
To remind everyone that we work to live, not live to work. And this battle, we saw our brothers and sisters who are suffering, who are suffering, not getting days off, not getting time with family. It's time for the working class to stick together, and solidarity is our key for that.
Agreed. Thank you all so much for coming on. And I definitely would love to have you back at some point. At least, Ron, if you want to talk about the nationalization of it, because I think that's where it gets all sorts of interesting. And then I'll be called Communist Karen and what other nonsense somebody will throw at me in there. But
hey, at this point, you're kind of pushing yourself in that direction.
I can't help myself. Like I feel like if I keep getting lefter and lefter, by the time I'm like my parents' age, I think I'm going to fall off the end.
And anything that's going to work in favor of labor, because as we've talked about, Ron, as we talked about, as I share with everybody, I have met a lot of different people in labor, and I can assure each and every one of you that labor is the great equalizer. You have just as many in several unions, whether it's firefighters, whether it's the Teamsters, you have, whether it's the railroad workers, you have just as many Bernie Sanders supporters as you do Donald Trump supporters. And once they are in a union, all bets are off, because then it's about a living wage, universal health care, paid sick leave, all the things that universally people agree on. And that's why what you guys do is so vitally important to our future, regardless of what the two political parties, which are just, let's face it, arms of Wall Street and Silicon Valley at this point, we have to do what we can to ensure that you guys are able to not only survive, but thrive. That is our job. Ron Kavenkow, Jeff Kurtz, Matt Weaver.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Much respect. Solidarity for
Thank
sure.
you.
Bye, guys.
Have a great new year, gentlemen.
Take
We'll
care.
see
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
How fun is that?
This is the type of conversations that really make us, recognize that what we're doing is right.
I have
that's
special
what it's
love
about.
for railroad in general. Like it's definitely nostalgic. I mean, I wish we had it where it was contemporary, more so like other countries do. I mean, that would be nice. Like it would be nice if we could just get, I don't know, rail from West Palm to Orlando. That would be nice. We can't even get to Orlando from here. So, I mean,
we
it's
also
pretty
just
pathetic.
give a really big shout out, particularly to Carla Harrington. Can't thank you enough for your immense generosity.
Seriously,
Same.
please email us your snail mail address at generationalchange@gmail.com.
Everybody's contribution obviously matters. But
Absolutely.
your contribution is obviously tremendous. And, everything that we do here on the show goes towards transforming politics into service. It isn't about, this side's good or that side's bad. No, it's about recognizing that this is now more than ever, this is a class war. And we're losing.
Well, and now generational change is going to be what was it? It's like a solidarity member of the Railroad Workers United. So your money, when you send us stuff like that, that's what we do with it. We basically spread the love to all different organizations that are fighting the fight.
And with all due respect, Dirk Begg, Leftists, no, both parties are not the same. No one is saying that they're the same. Republicans are obviously more corporate than Democrats are. But when it comes to workers, they are united, and they're united against workers. And that's a fact.
Stop straw manning.
Yeah.
It's unattractive.
Doesn't work. So we are in a situation where we have a president who is claiming to represent workers. And he doesn't.
I think so, Joe. Since, especially considering, I don't think we've seen a president do something so shitty to labor since Reagan.
That is.
Okay, and then this is.
Although I would say it wasn't just one act, but the things that Clinton did during his administration to labor was a succession of things that ultimately
NAFTA, we have, that's true. Okay, that's true. But just this one specific thing that he's doing that is such a fuck you to labor. I can't think of any one instance.
And he
past
didn't have, and that's the
Reagan.
thing. He didn't have to do anything. He didn't have to get involved.
No, he did, because his corporate donors are making him. Well, plus, I don't know how much in charge Joe is anyway.
Well, that's
Who's
up for-
really in
that's
charge?
really up for debate.
Because it sure as hell ain't Mayo Pete over there on the transportation end. I don't know what the hell his job is for.
There's rumblings now that Joe Biden is going to get a primary challenger.
Do we know by whom? Who?
You know,
Oh, whatever. Good luck to that.
so if that's going to actually amount to anything, I don't know. We'll see if it ultimately comes to fruition.
Whatever.
But what you really need, if you're going to have anything, is have a real labor rally, and that's kind of our fight. To me, that really is what it's about. If you guys do like our content and appreciate the work that we're trying to do here, which is transforming politics into service, we would obviously appreciate if you would become a patron. Go to patreon.com/generational change for as little as $5 a month. And this is the holiday season. If you are feeling a little extra special, maybe you got a really big gift card and you're figuring out how to use it. Maybe this would be a great way to do it. Just a thought. But if you are feeling a little extra generous, $10 a month patrons will get the Lulu sticker and the Mansion Parliamentarian bumper sticker. Lord knows it's only in just a few days. It's only a year away from 2024, and we're already thinking about what it's going to be. Well, that's Jen's pick.
That is
Not necessarily mine, but if you are feeling extra special, $25 patrons will get the Tri-Blend Generational Change. Here Comes the Sun t-shirt, jersey.
It's a jersey.
Jersey, baseball jersey.
It's a baseball jersey.
It's really awesome.
Yeah.
Just Jen.
Just Jen.
So if you can support, that would obviously be tremendously appreciated. With that said,
What do we have
please
coming up?
go.
Oh, you have more?
Yes. Go to Cash App, $Jen Change. If you are so inclined to contribute, but don't want to get caught up in the whole idea of giving
Being
your
a subscriber.
personal information and having it be checked constantly.
I know, but if you're a subscriber, I feel like if I could build up a good amount of subscribers, we could really have like a nice little community, because I'm totally happy to communicate with people on Patreon and on Patreon. And I would be very hip to having monthly member meetings. I tried doing it, but nobody showed up. So I kind of feel like I would love, I would love, and if you guys do go on there and you do join, I do read the messages on there. I am actually the person who oversees our small Patreon. Look, I'd love to get to a place where we're just so overcome with members that I have to actually have help. But right now it's just me. So if you have things that you want to see or suggestions, I'm definitely more inclined to listen to somebody who's a patron.
Oh, absolutely.
Than a non-patron. But no, in seriousness, if you guys really have any suggestions, anybody can reach out, generationalchange@gmail.com. If there's a subject matter you think, somebody that you're interested in, a book you read, anything, I'm very up for suggestions.
Yes,
but we have a lot of stuff lined up. Peter's been very busy.
Yes, we do. We are going to ring in the new year with Jesse Ventura's son, Tyrell. It'll be a great conversation. Tyrell
Ventura is going to be here. And I haven't checked out their Substack. I need to do so, but they're always working on good stuff over there.
For those of you wondering, I'm just going to let you guys know. It is the person who is potentially going to be running for president in a primary against Joe Biden is Marianne Williamson. Take with that what you will. We'll see what happens. As far as I'm concerned, if she does not run an unabashed pro-labor campaign, then it's dead on arrival. But what Joe did does create an opening for somebody to go right in on the labor movement, which is where it needs to be anyway. So we'll see. But I think if one person gets in, I can see that ultimately resulting in more people getting in. That I think, would you say that that's probably possible?
I sure as hell hope so, if that's the menu.
Well, hopefully the menu gets bigger. We don't need one that is going to be over very fast. We need one where there's a lot of ideas. I think there's a lot of pros to Marianne. I think there's cons as well.
I could say do your research, people. Dig a little bit beyond the surface before you.
But it's also very important to realize that Joe Biden should not be able to skate to the nomination, because if he does, it's going to be very ugly.
He already just skated to where he is now. Already skated there. How else do you think he barely won during a pandemic against Donald Trump? Good God. If that is not a sign of somebody who can really hit a second term. It's just not. You barely win against Donald Trump in a pandemic, and you somehow think that being a mediocre at best anything. I don't even know if I would say that. Like, and in what universe does that get someone reelected?
It was completely different with Trump when he was president and didn't have really a primary challenge, because Trump was, as up until the pandemic, he was extremely popular in his party and extremely popular with independents. Yeah, all the suburban liberals and Democrats hated his guts, but
That doesn't matter to
it's
them.
much like Ron DeSantis. DeSantis doesn't care if Democrats hate him.
No.
He just cares if independents like him and Republicans love him, and he has that on lock.
That's a good point,
So
Chris.
That's
You're a very good point. He didn't skate. He couldn't have stood upright enough to skate.
he never actually left his basement, so it is what it is.
He's just sitting
So-
there on some sort of life support.
So if you're ultimately going to, you know what, Double K, that could very well be the real, I guess what you would call wild card, because I could see that happening.
Well, and therein is probably the only way that someone like Joe would skate by again or sleep through again.
And the crazy thing is that
that
this
would happen.
But I will say this: this is the type of country that is aching for something else, and just the thought of Trump potentially running as an independent, regardless of all of his baggage, it's going to be like Ross Perot all over again, only we're living in an age today where, if you guys also want to see sort of like a test case of where that could potentially be very interesting, is what ends up happening in Arizona with Kirsten Sinema. Kari Lake is very likely going to run for the U.S. Senate. Ruben Gallego, they've been floating his name on the Democratic side. He is relatively progressive, I would say, especially for Arizona for the most part. But ultimately, is that going to be a three-way race where it's the Democrat, Republican, and an independent?
I think Sinema loses because she's not popular.
She probably does, but that also very likely puts Kari Lake in the Senate as well. So
maybe that
like
was the plan all along, because the truth is that Kirsten Sinema has been acting like someone who does not care about whether or not she's reelected. She is not popular in Arizona.
Emerald, here's what I would say regarding Newsom. I think that if Marianne gets any type of momentum, and it looks like that it might be a race where a poll comes out and it shows that she's got 25 to 30% of the vote, then I could easily see Newsom getting in, much like Bobby Kennedy got in against Lyndon Johnson in 68. Remember, it was initially Eugene McCarthy who was running against LBJ, and then Bobby decided to get in the race, and that's when all hell broke loose. So I could definitely see a circumstance where something like that could happen. Will it happen? I don't know. On January 4th, we're having one of Jen's, speaking of which, a particular guest that you're really looking forward to having on the show.
The Kush Queen is coming.
Kush Queen, Olivia Alexander.
The Kush Queen is coming. I feel like that commercial with the cats where like the queen is coming from, like Princess Diaries. I feel like I should do that. And it's like the Kush Queen. I mean, that pleases me to no end.
Oh, and for coming on, I'll give you guys one. For the last time of the year, since this is the end of the year.
This is the end of the year.
Quite a year, hasn't it?
Okay, so we have Ty coming on Monday. We have Kush Queen on next Wednesday.
Anything left in here, I don't think.
No, you probably have to fill it.
And then on Monday, January 9th, we will have on Ariana Peccary, who was part of corporate media, has stepped down, was basically a whistleblower, and has a lot of interesting things to say. I think you guys will really enjoy that if you are familiar. And then we are ultimately going to have Jordan Chariton back on the podcast. He is obviously with Status Quo, writing a book. We're going to talk about that. Some other guests that we're hoping to get. Oh, that's very sweet.
I know. Picture of Jordan. And
so just be aware of that. And if you guys...
Oh, good God.
That was not good.
No, because it's all ash. I told you need to fill it. Told you.
Thanks for killing me, Jen.
I told you need to fill it.
Yeah.
Whatever, dude.
Yeah, don't drugs. It's bad. It's very bad.
No, I'm not anti-drug.
Yeah.
I have no.
Well, that's like ash everywhere.
I know, dude. Why did I told you need to fill it?
That's why I don't smoke.
No, I told you need to fill it.
Well, I mean, if I don't drink, I mean, I guess I got a couple things.
Oh yeah, you're a whole lot of fun.
Point. No, seriously.
This one's a whole party and a half.
It tastes like crap. But
good God.
With that said, it's been quite the year.
So we have a lot of good stuff coming up.
We do. And we hope you guys have enjoyed it. Obviously, to those of you who celebrated Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah. Those who celebrated Christmas, Merry Christmas.
For those of you who are here on our Festivus, thank you for coming.
Well, of course, we always celebrate Festivus. Everybody should celebrate Festivus. That should be a holiday.
I don't really do any holidays. Some years I'll host a winter solstice for my girlfriends.
That's nice.
Yeah, it's my husband calls it like the coven meeting, but kind of, I guess. Whatever.
But we're obviously very grateful for each and every one of you. If nothing else, it's been quite an unfortunate year, one that has had a lot of downs.
I think we say that every year, by the way. And by we, I don't mean you and me. I mean just like in general, we always say, "Oh, it's been such a hard year." You know, every year is a hard year. 20, okay, I get that was the year like the COVID year. So yeah, that was exceptionally hard, especially for students and people. But like other than that type of thing where we were people in quarantine, every year is kind of not a great year for most people. That's the class war. That's the whole point of it. If the years were good, then we wouldn't be sitting here. If the years were good, then I wouldn't feel the need to like, you know, have ever run for Congress.
That's true.
So the whole point is that things are not good. That's why we're here. I wish things were good.
And
If things were good, then I would just go, I'd live in the little mountains I might have like a tiny house in the woods, you know, minding my business.
Matt, thank
It'd
you.
Be very, very.
And make sure you subscribe on YouTube. YouTube is where it's at.
Yeah. I mean, look, I would really appreciate it if things would just be good. I would even be happy if I had a representative that was at least fighting for things to be good, even though things aren't good. That would still be better. Like that would be something. I don't understand. Are there any congressional people? Are there any representatives that have been out like standing with the railroad workers?
Well, probably not to the degree that they need to be at this point.
Well, it sounds to me that the degree is that the railroad workers need to have one union. That's what it sounds like to me.
Oh, I would agree with that.
That seems to be a problem.
12 unions is 1, 2.
Well, what he was just saying, what Ron was just saying is they have 12 clubs. They have 12 railroad clubs and not really a union. And that's really and you know what? That was just proven. The fact that our president said, no strike for you. The whole point of a strike is not asking for permission. That's what I think is missing. And part of that, as I always say, is that we have no social safety net. People have no resources to strike. If you go out on strike, you're screwed.
I think the more you talk about labor, the more you talk about the importance of making that the central focus and not being distracted by things that are not going to be easily fixed or corrected. You know, it's kind of like everyone wants to talk about the libs of TikTok and the crap that she says on TV.
I don't even follow this.
What Greta Thunberg and Andrew Tate are talking about.
Yeah, that's not interesting.
Anything that is going to distract from the core issues of the things that we're fighting for, we're all fighting for, or if we're not all fighting for, we should be all fighting for collectively.
Okay, so I did have a tidbit of interesting information when I was going to tell you that I was watching PBS, and I forget, it was uploaded today, guys. So PBS NewsHour, there was a segment where, and I can never remember her name, the lady on the PBS NewsHour, was talking to 3 people from 3 different states regarding legalization of cannabis in their respective states. One state, it was like Michigan was one of them, and one of them was Oklahoma, and states that are at various stages. And what's so interesting is Michigan is like out earning and out making, like Michigan is raking in the bucks. Was the point of this, this is what I got from this story, is that Michigan is like ringing in the money, and yet Flint doesn't have clean water. So this is what I'm not understanding, because.
But don't you want Gretchen Whitmer to be president?
No, but this is something where I can point this out. This is not the work of the cannabis people. Okay. Because if it were up to the cannabis people, the people in Flint, Michigan would have clean water. The cannabis people. So this is what's very frustrating. So they're profiting off of this industry at like record numbers in terms of their government, their infrastructure, all this. And yet they still don't give clean water to their people. That's disgusting. That's what I was going to say. So yay, Michigan, record cannabis profits.
I'll tell you one fun job. If I could be like a labor rallier, more or less like a labor spokesperson, just for everybody, I would do that in a second.
Talk to Linda Joseph. I'm sure she'd have you come work with her.
We'd go around the whole country.
Although nobody does a rally like Linda.
No, Linda's great.
I know.
But being able to rally, I think Double K needs help, Jen.
Oh my God, that's horrible. That's horrible. Double K. And it's really interesting to me that she lives in the same state as Harvey K, and he has an E at the end of his name. But that's just the thing. That's so sad. You have to travel 90 minutes to get weed. That's unfortunate.
Yeah. I don't think there's a law currently about, well, is it?
What?
Is it decriminalized in
What?
Wisconsin?
I don't know. I don't know if it's decriminalized in Wisconsin.
We'll have to find that out.
Michigan is
That
definitely
could be
a good place.
that'd be a great Christmas present for Double K.
I can't send. Well, sending is a whole other story.
Yeah, I don't know what the rules are there.
There's rules there, man. There's rules. That's the rules.
Damn, man. Now, if only Joe,
That's the federal thing, man.
Yeah.
That's the rules.
Hey, you think if Bernie was president, he wouldn't have decriminalized?
He would have already expunged and pardoned and there are certain things that we can say. You know, you always say, oh, you say that, but you don't ever know, and that's the truth. You don't really know, but there are certain things that I have a certain amount of confidence that Bernie would have definitely done had he been the person sitting there. That is one of them. He would have absolutely decriminalized cannabis, taken it off as a Schedule 1, and he would have definitely he would have pardoned all of those people, all of the cannabis people. Oh, no, don't put on that. Oh, you're bringing that idiot? Not this doofus. Oh, good God.
Look, look, it's past my bedtime, but I just want to come on here and let you know that I don't give a damn about them workers.
Yeah, clearly.
No,
You just screwed them.
No, hey, what's that smell? That smells really good. Ah.
I don't know if you're talking about the weed or my hair, but either way, you're creepy.
No, keep that away. That's illegal. You can't smoke that. That's bad stuff. Stay in school, man.
Stay away from my
No,
hair.
stay in school. Look,
So gross.
here are the facts, Jack. We're not actually solving problems. We're keeping it status quo. That's what we're doing. Not that we're trying to hurt you.
You just do edibles, Double K.
I
Very interesting.
really messed up, didn't I? Yeah, I kind of did. I don't know what to do. But I'm going to run for president again. It's
Yeah,
gonna be
that's
wonderful.
just friggin' great.
Isn't that great?
No,
I'm
it's
gonna
not,
win.
Joe. Go away, Sleepy Joe. Go take a nap.
Get out of here, man.
Go take
Come
a nap.
on now.
I feel like if I just turn something back here, he'll just go to sleep.
I'm tired.
Go.
And you should be too.
Ugh.
But great to see you all. And you're going to vote for me again, you know.
The hell I will. The hell I will, Joe.
I got hairy legs.
Ugh,
Really hairy.
so gross.
They turn blonde in the summer, in the light. Isn't that great?
I'm gonna so
That's
gross.
what I'm talking about. You know, I hadn't been on the show in a while, and I want to come on and say, hi.
Ugh, Joe, go away.
How you think you're going to stop me? You don't know Joe.
Well, as of right now, there is nobody that's gonna stop you in our party, but
Right.
but you're gonna
That's
you're
because I'm great.
no, but I do think you will lose to DeSantis if it's you.
Who?
Yeah, you know who
Oh,
I'm
that
talking
guy.
about. Yeah, that guy.
Yeah, well, he's young enough to be my son. Can you believe that? That guy going to be president? Well, here's to a terrible 22 and an even more terrible 23.
It's ridiculous.
Corn Pop was a bad dude.
Corn Pop.
Yeah.
So ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Like the whole state of affairs is ridiculous. That is the president of the United States. Mayo Pete is the Secretary of Transportation. Amy Coney Island is on the Supreme Court and can't name the 5 freedoms granted by the First Amendment. This is not a good situation.
Hey,
we're
at
in.
least you've got Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter.
I am.
In that case, you're living the good life.
It's just not. It's not.
By the way,
good.
Warren Buffett's biggest.
Well, we definitely heard how the railroad workers feel about him.
Okay, so
Apparently,
we're gonna.
there are no good billionaires,
So
people.
I'm not gonna. We're not gonna say as of yet because this happened way too late. But we're gonna kick off the new year with whether it's gonna be like a new kind of topic.
Oh my
Listen,
God,
gotta love
this
that
guy?
face. Yeah, gotta love that face. Right?
That doesn't even look real.
No, he's real. That's just a glass eye.
Oh, he's got a glass eye?
Mm-hmm. So, just so you guys know, this
Are you going to share that?
is what.
You guys need to see this
Yeah,
guy.
you're
But
gonna-
what's this about? So this is like Warren Buffett's second in command person? Okay.
So Warren Buffett, second in command, wants you to know that you should stop complaining, says billionaire investor Charlie Munger. Everybody's 5 times better off than they used to be.
5 times.
5
maybe.
times.
5 times better off.
And
5 times.
you're 500 times better off than anybody.
Except for look at what he looks like.
Well, he's 98 years old.
Oh, God.
And he's still going.
Go away, Charlie. Can't take your money with you.
He'll be going soon enough. Imagine that. Imagine being at that age, knowing that at any minute you could be dead, and he's like, "Fuck all of you." I mean, imagine that.
Well, that's how I feel. That's the same as like the Koch brothers or any of those people. These are sociopathic people.
They are.
That's a sociopath. He even
Yeah.
looks like a sociopath.
Yeah. Well, he's not human. Billionaire Charlie Munger thinks we should all be a lot happier. Munger, the longtime investment partner and friend of fellow billionaire Warren Buffett, who hates workers, says he doesn't understand why people today aren't more content with what they have, especially compared to harder times throughout history.
Shut up and eat your gruel and you'll like it.
Good God in heaven. Got to come up with something good for him to start the new
Oh
year.
my goodness.
Got to come up with something good.
Oh my, how dare you people expect things?
Get down there and shine my shoes. Something along those lines.
And then people wonder like why this can get violent, or someone like Nancy Pelosi wonders why someone would break into her house.
Guys, we need to unite labor. This is not going to happen through, the
The Green Party.
Yeah, the squad's not going to do this.
The Green Party ain't going to
The
do
Green
it.
Party ain't doing it. Movement for whatever party.
None of the individual factions can do this. Not DSA, not any of that can end it. Like, it's just not going to happen that way.
Yeah.
It has to be one effort, and the only unifying factor is labor.
That is the unifying factor.
Because this is a class war.
It really is.
I know. It's a total class war.
And so for New Year's, remember.
I don't do resolutions.
Well, I'm not saying it has to be a resolution, but just what you should be preparing for in 2023. Excuse me, let's not get ahead of ourselves. For 2023, the movement for labor must take the next step.
Yeah, guys, if you pay attention where you live, for Starbucks, for if you live near an Amazon center or any place that's in the process of trying to unionize, and be there and show up for them. Literally, physically. It's important. It is important.
Very important.
Like if and I know it's hard for people to even know about these things. That's part of it. Like we happen to know because we happen to know when there's going to be this particular protest.
Yeah.
But it's hard for people to even know. But it's really important.
It is. So keep fighting the good fight. To all of you guys, Colinello, Chris, Double K, Dirtbag Leftist, all of you guys, Carla Harrington, obviously, Carrie,
Everybody, you guys were
Capitola,
really
Matt,
appreciative.
Emerald, all of you guys. It's very, very appreciated.
Blocked Declan.
Yeah, well,
Declan got himself blocked tonight.
Good luck, because
We tried putting him in a
taking
timeout,
minutes.
but it wasn't working, so
yeah,
he got
he just
blocked.
wasn't listening. He wasn't taking advice. He couldn't get it, and he didn't.
I've
think we
told
were
him,
serious.
do not be nasty about our guests, dude. You want to,
Especially about labor, guys.
Yeah, no,
Get
go
that.
away.
You're out.
Go away. You can't be mean to my guests.
So, with that said, much appreciation to each and every one of you. Thank you so much for your continued support. Have a very happy new year, and we'll see you Monday.